Hi guys, in today's painting we're going to be focusing mostly on paying attention to values. And in your printout options you have the line drawing, you have a reference photo that is in color, and then also that is in black and white. And I'm going to be spending most of my time looking at the black and white version and matching up the values that I see on my value scale here. I've labeled them 1 from the lightest, 10 is the darkest. And you can see all my paint colors here. I mostly use M Graham, but I do have a few tubes of Daniel Smith sap green that I'm trying to use up, so that is going to be one of our colors today. So the line drawing I've done in a micron pen that is a light gray, and hopefully you can either use a pencil or a micron pen or even a colored pencil, but go very, very lightly so that you're not creasing the paper. Watercolor paper can, you can kind of make a divot with it, or a crease where you put too much pressure with a pencil or a pen. So I want you to just trace it very lightly. And then for your brushes, you want to use as big a brush as possible for each space. We're going to be painting the petals of the succulent one petal at a time. So you really want to try to use the biggest brush that will easily fit into the leaf shape. So when our watercolor paper is wet, it is slightly vulnerable. The surface of it is vulnerable. So when it's wet, we want to just paint, put our paints in, lift our edges, whatever we need to do, but then just get out and let that area dry so that we're not overworking an area. That's part of what makes something look overworked. All right, so in my paint palette, I have ultramarine blue at the top, and then I have sap green, I have pyrrole red, raw sienna, and Indian yellow. So I am working right now, I'm just kind of playing around, looking at making some different greens. I don't really like sap green as a pure color by itself very often at all. So you'll see I'll go into this red because red is an opposite of green. And so I'm trying to neutralize the green, but this red is a very, very powerful red. So I don't want a red color right now. I just want a slightly modulated green. So I'm cleaning up this red. It's way too saturated red. So, and I also want to keep, I want to keep the paints in the original pots. I want to keep those as pure as possible. So occasionally I'll be cleaning up the edges so that they're not seeping into each other. So I add just a little bit of red to the sap green to neutralize it a little bit. And then of course, ultramarine blue to help this succulent have that blue-gray appearance. But I also add a tiny bit of red to that also. So you can see me mixing. I'll be just making a variety of mixes as I go around this shape. But my main focus is on where is the dark part of each petal and where is the light part of each petal, and trying to create that from the first wash. So each petal will have at least 2 to 3 layers on it. So this first time through is not the final values. I'm just starting to try to build the base of the value shape. So I wet the area of a petal, and then I can drop in some of the blue-green that I mixed. Now I can kind of correct the edges. I can lift and push the pigment back. Now my board is set at like a 12-degree angle, so you can see that the paint is running down towards my hand and away from where I first put the paint on. I like to paint at an angle. It just gives me more control, and I can also rotate my painting board, the painting surface, so that I can use that gravity in another area. So we're just going to be painting around this painting one little section at a time. And you can see right now I'm putting on just pure water first. You can see the glisten of the water on the page. And anywhere I put water right now, then when I drop the paint in, it's going to spread everywhere that the paint is wet or the paper is wet, but it will stay there. It won't just run all over the paper. So I'm able, by having water control, I'm able to have control over where the pigment goes. So I have not sped up this footage at all. This is exactly how I paint. So you will see sometimes where I'm pausing and my hand is just kind of hovering. I might start to do something and then stop, and I'm thinking about the next shape that I'm going to paint. There's definitely some thinking that goes into painting. We don't want to just jump in without a plan. So like I said, I'm going around the painting. I'm painting areas that are dry. I don't want to paint next to a leaf that's I had just painted, because then those colors will bleed into each other. I'm wanting to have clear distinction of values. Again, that's what I'm focusing on the most. So you can see that I'll have different mixes. Like this one is a little bit warmer of a shade of green. But like I said, I really want, as you paint each section of this succulent, I want you to be thinking about where is the light part of this petal and where is the darker part of this petal. So as I go in to paint this next petal or leaf shape, I want to point out that I'm painting behind the petal in front of it, which seems kind of obvious. But what I'm doing is, by creating a shape that's behind another lighter shape, I am helping to reveal that shape that's in front of it. And that's called negative painting. So this leaf that I'm painting right now has a definite fold in it, and so that's what I'm trying to show by having the top part of it be slightly bluer. But again, because we're going to be building up this these leaves with so many layers, I don't really want you to be worrying too much about, oh, this is a little bluer or this is a little warmer. If anything, just doing a blue scale of lighter to darker blues is honestly just as good, and then we'll add the warmer tones later. All right, now I'm going back to, in this leaf shape, I'm wetting it with just water first. You'll notice that I'm not doing that on every single one. Some of them, I think that it will add variation to just be adding straight to dry paper, but a lot of them that are a fairly light color, I want to allow that water to help it blend and have really soft edges. So by getting the paper wet first, that is helping it to achieve that. Now, again, I'm just basically bouncing around the exterior of this succulent and painting the exterior leaves or petals first. So you can use a hair dryer if you've gotten to a point where you've kind of painted every other leaf shape and they're all still kind of damp. You can definitely use a hair dryer so that you can move on. But since I live where it's super, super dry climate, I don't have that problem at all. Things dry so quickly here. And that's another reason I love this type of project with really small areas. I'm able to control and soften up the edges and not get hard edges when I'm painting a small area, like just one petal at a time. There are a lot of painters that really excel in large sweeping washes over the whole painting that are wet into wet, and that is so beautiful. But I have struggled with it a lot in my climate, and I've just decided to embrace smaller areas and trying to control my edges. So I am looking at my value scale again and just wanting to make sure that I'm building things up in the correct areas. So I'm always constantly referencing back to the value scale and then the value structure of the plant itself. The darkest areas are going to be at the base of the plant where the leaves meet the plant itself, and the shadows that are created there. All right, so I'm moving into the inner area now, and this is where referencing your reference photo really, really helps, because in the line drawing, we're just getting the basic outline. We're not really noticing where it's darker or lighter. So I pick one leaf in the center that has some dark areas, and I'm just going to put that in first, and then this one that's above it. So on this one, it's darker at the base, but then the top edge is really transparent and light is shining on it. So I want this leaf, I'm not going to color it all. I'm going to let the top area be mostly water, and then it go down into the color at the base. So you might see I'm using my paper towel a lot. I will go into paint and put some paint down, and then I will rinse my brush, but then I always blot it out. I don't want to be introducing a lot of water. See, I dab there. I'm putting some water on, but I have control, or just there, I swiped over to my other hand. My left hand is always holding a paper towel so that I can control how much water I'm putting back on. Different brushes can hold a different amount of water in the belly of the brush, and we can use that to our advantage if we know what we're doing. So on this one, I'm adding just a teeny bit of yellow here as we're coming up towards the center of the succulent. And I also want to give the feel of the light being reflected here. This petal here has a definite warm cast to it. And so I'm just putting a little glaze of yellow, but I'm keeping it pretty light. And you can always, if you go over a other petal shape, you can always dab at it just a little bit with your clean paper towel. All right, so I'm building up a blue glaze now and going over to another petal that I hadn't painted at all yet. Now, again, it's behind other ones, so I'm wanting that where it's behind another to be darker than the leaf in front of it. All right, now the base of this leaf is one of the darkest areas in the whole painting, and so I'm building that up quite a bit, that value. It is going to go quite a bit darker, like almost up to a 6 or 7 on my value scale. So you can see this is quite the shift by putting that in now. It's helping me to see a deeper range, how far I want to go. And again, this isn't even as dark as it's going to get in the future. And another thing to remember is always that watercolor dries lighter than it appears when you first put it on the paper. And that is because the water is dispersing the pigment. And then as the water evaporates, it lightens. So I'm using my clean water and drying out my brush to blend this to try to make a really soft gradation so that it starts dark at the base of the plant, at the base of the leaf where it joins the plant, and then it's just fading into where the light is hitting it at the end. All right, now it's good to always take your time and make sure if your drawing might have some errors in it, you're always going back and forth to the reference to make sure that you know exactly where one leaf begins and the other one ends, so that you're sure to paint the leaf behind, and that's clearly defining the leaf in front of it. So again, the leaf in front of this one that I just painted had been painted previously, but by now it's dry, so that I'm able to go right up next to it and it's not bleeding over it at all. Now this leaf shape has a cupped and rounded shape, so I'm wanting to leave the edge of it really light and then getting darker towards the base. And again, if you get a little too much pigment on an area, you can always use your paper towel to lift, and that can start to also create some interesting texture. I don't want to go overboard on texture at the beginning though. I feel like texture is something better done in the later stages. And right now, again, my main focus is when I look at each leaf shape is how light or dark is this shape and what parts of this shape are darker than others, so that I can blend those, but I also want to start to make the shape feel rounded by having certain areas of it darker. So for this leaf, I'm going to be starting with my brighter green mix, but then halfway through, I'm going to transition to a bluer mix, and that is going to create a really soft transition. It's going to be really, really subtle, might not even be noticeable in the finished painting, but I feel like the more often that we can do that, not just make one shade or one value, like have some lighter and darker areas, It just can make each leaf seem more interesting and give it more, just more personality. Each one of these leaves is truly different on this plant, and so it's fun to kind of celebrate that. So you can see what I'm doing with my brush. I will clean it, I'll come back with a thirsty brush. It's not dripping, I'm not adding more water. I'm just kind of scooting the pigment around so that the darker pigment is up towards the top of that leaf shape, and then it makes a gradual transition to lighter. So sometimes even after you've put the pigment down, you can use a brush that you've squeezed the excess water out of and redirect the paint. And that, that amount of time is pretty short, but it's still an option. And it's fun to experiment to see how long you can work with the paint. But I would still say it's best to get the pigments where you want them, and then let them dry on their own. And these petals or leaves that are behind each other, and it's a really small section that we can even see. I just want to keep that one really light, and go at it carefully, and make sure that it's different than the ones around it. All right, and then with this one, we're just going in with our brighter green again, and this is a pretty light wash. You can see how it's catching the light from my camera lights, and it almost just looks like plain water. So I'm just making a variety of washes, again, a variety of colors. I've got bluer greens, and so in this section I'm adding almost pure blue to this one here. And again, I'm wanting it to be darker as it gets towards the base of the leaf. That will again highlight and frame the one that's in front of it. Now this is the second coat on this leaf right here, and you can see I'm building up the value in the center, and then I squeeze out my brush. I'm not adding more water, I'm just blending so that that area where I first added the blue stays the darkest, and then the rest of it is just a natural soft blend. I don't really want any harsh lines. Now, as I'm starting to work towards the center of the succulent, I'm really paying attention to where the petal is coming up towards me, towards the camera that took this reference image anyway. From my point of view, is that I'm going to want the top edges of that to stay light so that it has that rounded form. Succulents have such thick leaves. These aren't thin leaves, so that side that's facing me, you'll see on your reference photo, is catching the light. And so we want to be sure that we're each particular leaf and section that we observe carefully where the light is hitting and where the shadows have started to form. Now there's some really dark shadows in this area, and it can be tempting to go in with dark colors right away. But I would much rather build up 3, 4, 5 layers at a time, or over time, I should say, than trying to do it right at the start. That's just my approach. I'd rather work with lighter washes and just gradually increase the value, than find that I've gone way too dark in one area. So again, this is a second wash on one of these back leaves, and I haven't necessarily done a single wash on all of them yet, just ones that I know are having a distinct shape or some distinct darks are just kind of pulling my attention. So it's all right to jump around your painting a little bit. I won't want to go too far before I get at least some color on all of the petals, and that will help me to be judging whether or not the values are correct, because just like color, value is relative. Now, this little petal right here is one of my favorites in the whole plant. I love the way the back side of it is rounded and is catching the reflected light. So right now I'm just painting the front edge that is in shadow, and then it's going to get a lot lighter, and I want to be sure to leave that. So, but it is important to start to get that shadow, or because without the shadows, we can't tell what's being hit by light if we don't see shadows as well. All right, so on some of these petals, as we're getting towards the center of the plant, the center of the succulent, there isn't exactly a line on the line drawing that shows where the edge starts to turn, and it part of the leaf is facing the center, and then part is facing kind of sideways towards us. So that line isn't there. So that's where you have to use observation and going back to your reference photo again and again, and again looking at the black and white is what I'm doing. I'm not really looking at the color version at all. I'm looking at how light or dark something is, because that's what's going to give us the shape that we need. Now I'm going to use a little bit of this warmer neutralized mix. It's got the teeniest bit of the red in it, but it's definitely warmer, to show the back side of this leaf that's really rounded. It's catching reflected light. So I'm going to be showing that in this painting as warm lights. So that's why I put that as a slightly yellowish color there, a warmer green. So sometimes when I'm painting, I will make a mistake and I will take the water and paint mix past where I wanted it to go. And one way that I deal with this is I can kind of push the moisture back with my finger. I'll do that in just a second. You'll see I went a little bit past, so I kind of push it back. And surprisingly, if it's just a little bit of paint, that will seem to help. All right, so now I'm pulling back up my reference photo again, and I'm looking at this leaf here that I haven't painted yet at all, and it's got a really cool divot, scooped up area, and so I'm looking to see how dark that area actually gets, and it gets quite dark, and we want to make sure that we get that placed as accurately as we can, so that it gives it that divot shape, that shadow shape, that's showing that it's like a cup shape. And I just love that. It's actually one of my favorite leaves in the whole plant. It's kind of silly, but after you've been staring at a reference photo and painting each leaf very carefully, you can kind of start to develop favorites. So I put the blue color down, and now I'm just blending it out with my rinsed and then dried out brush. I'm not introducing a lot of water. I'm just teasing the color out to the edges with this damp brush. It's not a soaking wet brush. And then I can add a little bit more color. Um, and one of the things I am wanting to teach you guys as you follow along with this tutorial is what I'm thinking about as I paint, and also what I'm trying to achieve, but that hopefully then you can start to do this in your own paintings, that you can see where the darker values are and whether it's a soft edge or a more harsh edge, like where the shadows are going to be. That's a very sharp edge, where when it's on this petal, the petal itself, I don't want a hard lined edge showing the end of a shadow area. I want that to be really, really soft. And another thing that I wanted to point out is that by using a limited color palette like this painting will have interest, it will have variety, but it will also have cohesion. You will see that in almost every area of this painting, I've used at least a little bit of the ultramarine blue, whether it's in a mix or by itself. And that is going to give the succulent a cohesive feeling. And another thing that I like to point out about ultramarine blue, it's one of my favorite colors in my entire palette. It's one of the paints that I started with when I first started painting about 7 years ago. So ultramarine blue is a granulating color, and that means that the paint pigments will settle into the grooves of the watercolor paper. And in a lot of areas, that's actually really helpful because it's creating texture and interest on its own. And you're just controlling the value, whether it's light or dark. But as it dries and the paint settles, it's just going to give a really subtle texture all its own. It's another thing I just love so much about painting watercolor, that you can't get in other mediums. And learning about the supplies we're using, the tools that you have at your disposal, it will really help as you get more and more familiar with what each paint pigment can do and its properties. There are other paint pigments, blue pigments, that are not as granulating. So if you were painting something that you didn't want it to have that built-in texture, then you would probably want to use a different blue. All right, so I'm going in to paint this, one of these upper leaves that I haven't touched yet, and it's actually surprisingly pretty dark because, again, it's standing more upright. It's not laying and catching as much of the light. So I want to start to show that basically right from the start, but still leaving that upper edge light, because you can see as it's the very top edge is catching the light, but then this is in shadow very quickly because it's upright. And the only way that we can really learn to do this is just by closely observing what is happening here. This is not a flat shape. And so we want to leave that light. So I squeeze out my brush and I can actually lift some of the paint that I had first put down, and then just really make this a soft edge, but try to leave this top edge light, almost no pigment on it at all. And so then you're able to see how the darker colors on the leaves behind it, how that's starting to reveal the shapes in front of it. All right, so now I'm going over to this more upright one also, and you can see how bright it is. It is really catching the light, and those leaves are side by side. So again, that's helping to describe the shape of this plant. Now I'm zooming in on this next section. Hopefully you can see a little better when I zoom in what I'm talking about, that I'm just painting the inner side of this leaf and then slowly blending it out, but then leaving the back side of it that we don't have actually a line there to tell us where the front side and the back side are. So it's only our values that are going to start describing this. All right, so now for the front side of this next leaf, you can see what a dark shadow there is right there. So I know that I can go, as far as value, I can go up to a 6 or a 7. So I'm not going to be too tentative here. I know that I can build this up. It needs to be quite a bit darker than what's around it. So I'll put water, or I'll put the paint straight in without water, and then I'll blend it out with a little bit of water. So that really is another way that I'm creating value, is letting the paint be undiluted and then diluting it with water as I pull it down. Now this lower leaf is extremely dark. It is, the whole thing overall is a dark value. It is probably at its lightest point like a 5. So I can go pretty dark, and I also grade it quite a bit down. And I'm also not wetting the paper first here. It's okay for this to just be darker. Again, that's going to help describe where the light's coming from, and that this part of the plant is not getting much light at all. So now I'm lifting. I squeeze out my brush with my paper towel, and then I can also dab that edge to create a slightly more sunstruck look, but it's just very, very light. You can also see, just as far as the color tones, how much grayer and slightly browner this leaf is. So it's looking kind of out of place right now, and sometimes that happens. You'll have an area of your painting that stands out, and it doesn't look great right now. And so then you just have to decide, do I just keep working, or is this an area I need to fix right now? Usually what I will do is just keep working, just keep adding value and adding tones around the painting. And then usually by the time I've got at least 1 to 2 coats on everything, I'll be able to more easily identify what needs more work. So I'm doing This leaf that's underneath, again, it's underneath and it's quite a bit darker. So I'm wanting to be sure that I leave that pointy edge of the leaf in front of it. And I'm not doing any of the reds. So I'm trying to leave any areas where the reds are going to be. I'm trying to leave that almost pure white of the paper, the red tips of the succulents. So yeah, again, this one, it's going to be quite a bit darker, but then as it comes out, it does get just a little bit lighter. So while this leaf is still wet, I'm kind of evening up the edges, but then I'm going to squeeze my brush out really good. Now I'm going to lift and really dramatically lift this paint. I hope you can see that. That this brush is thirsty now because I take all the, the easily accessed moisture out of it. And so it's kind of like slurping it up. But this only works while the paint is still wet. But you can create some really fun highlights like this, and it's really subtle. The edges are really soft. It's not harsh, and that's one way you can lift. I will be showing you guys later a way you can lift once the paint has already dried, but this is a way you can lift an area when the paint is still wet. All right, so now I'm identifying there's only one leaf that I have not put any paint on yet. So we're headed towards the finish line of at least getting one coat on everything. All right, so now I'm going back up into the center of the succulent. Again, I'm looking really carefully at my reference photo, the black and white, so that I can see where I need to put the dark edges that are creating the top of the other petals in front of them. So again, you can see I'm taking some pauses. I stop and my eyes are going back and forth. You can see how close my reference is to my painting, so that my eyes can just look from the painting to the reference, to the painting to the reference, and find my place and be able to correctly show these shapes. So now I'm mixing a really warm yellowy gray color that I'm going to be using, yellowy brown, I guess I should say, in the deeper areas of this succulent. I'm wanting this, I'm kind of doing this as adding things that I'm not seeing necessarily in the photograph that to my mind are going to increase the feeling of being sunlit. The areas where it's facing the sun more, the shadows are going to be warmer. So I'm making the shadows warmer towards the center and upper edges of the succulent. And then as we get down around these other edges, they're grayer and more cool shadows. So this little line that I'm putting in right now is what is called a cast shadow. Of course, then I'm still blending it out, but right at the base, you'll see on the reference photo, there's a bit almost of a straight line that is a cast shadow at the base of these leaves. Okay, I'm gonna draw right here. I'm gonna make a little bit of the point. Even though in the reference photo it's a little bit redder, I'm still gonna add the value there. I want to start defining that shape, and I want to be able to get this reflected light area and for it to start to make sense what's happening on this underneath side. So I need just a little bit more value there. Now sometimes I'll go in and I'll put in a paint color and it's just too dark, so I'll dab it with a paper towel. There's so many things that you can learn after just painting for years, doing a lot of your own paintings. Um, it I hear other artists talk about it as just putting in the brush miles. There's just a lot of things that the more you practice, the more you'll be able to um, identify what, when you put a paint color down that's a little too dark right away to lift it, and that it's not the end of the world, and just how to make those adjustments in real time. So we are really getting there. We've almost got one glaze on every single petal of this succulent. So one other reason I really like painting like this, it's good for this type of painting, is that you can stop at any time. You can take a break. You don't have this like wet into wet wash that you have to deal with right away. You can paint one or two or 10 petals and then come back the next day or in a couple hours. And I just find that this type of painting is very forgiving in that way. You do have to be aware that your the water will evaporate. And so if you have any mixes that you're kind of set that you like that color, just know that it will change as the water evaporates out of it. But with these really good paints, the M. Graham paints and Daniel Smith paints, you can just add water and they will reconstitute even your dried mixes in your different wells or categories. All right, so I'm going to mix a bluer mix and start to add in some of these darks down at the bottom. Again, I think that it's important to see that when I first add a first really dark, it's kind of startling, but again, it will lighten as the paint dries, as the water evaporates, it will lighten. But value is all relative. It's just compared to the lightness or darkness of the things around it. And as I build up the other shadows, this first dark leaf will end up looking like it belongs. So as you're working on your painting, we're getting to the stage where every layer that you're adding now will be different. It might need something different than what mine needs right now. That's one of the really unique things about watercolor is there's really no way to duplicate it exactly. So as I'm analyzing what needs done next, I noticed that this one leaf, I really think it needs a bluer cast. based on what's around it, the leaves that are around it, and that this side of this leaf is turned away from the light, so it's bluer on this side. So I go in with a almost pure blue wash right here on just this half of the leaf and then blend it out. But that might be different on yours. Yours may not need, it may need a green blue, not quite such a pure blue. Now, one thing I do recommend as you're working on your paintings is to be testing the paint mixes as you come up with a new mix. I'm going to mix a blue right here, and I've been doing this for 7 years. I know how dark of a color I want, but I do recommend you using scratch paper of the watercolor paper. You can use both sides. You can just do a little sample to see if it's what you want. You can do a little sample and then use a hair dryer to get it dry to see if it's going to evaporate into the color that you would like it to be. You might think that this is really, really blue as this is going on, but again, it's going to dry lighter. It's going to evaporate, and yeah, I'm just building up the shades of color. And I do like to kind of alternate. If I had done um, a blue gray before, I might go in with a warmer greener shade this time and kind of alternate, go back and forth between warm shades and cool shades in the glazes, and that is what's called optical mixing. That's allowing the paint to be layered so that as we view it, it's being mixed in what is dry layers, like it wasn't mixed together the first time. It's like the effect of laying one color of stained glass over another color of stained glass. It will change what you see, but those colors weren't mixed and made, a blue and a red made into a purple from the start. So that's a term called optical mixing, and that is used in a lot of different art media, not just in watercolor. And I just find this part thrilling. The more shadows you add, the more dramatic your shadows are, the more your painting starts to come to life. So again, I'll put a shadow in, but then I'll blend it out. I'm not, I don't want it to be so bold, but this right here is more of a cast shadow. And that means it's being cast by another object. It's not just that the whole shape itself is in shadow. It's where those objects are meeting each other. It's a direct shadow. All right, so a bit more drawing here on this one where you're drawing with your paintbrush, creating that edge and then blending it out. But that is, again, that's where the leaf is turning. The front part of it, the lighter part is facing the light. And just with that little bit, you help the eye to understand that that shape is narrow, it's coming up towards you, and the light is still being reflected on the back side of it as well. So now I'm going back to that lower leaf that has a distinct cupped shape. And then I'm going to be kind of going around and taking notice of which of these leaves has kind of a half shadow shape and going around and hitting the shadow side of those to try to help get all of those into that slightly folded feeling. All right, so now if you use your value scale and compare the value of the lower leaves and on the reference photo, the black and white, compare how dark these are, these lower sections, how much darker they need to get. Hopefully you can see that. I'm trying to show you here that this needs to go a lot darker. Like it's probably only a 3 in value now, even maybe not even that, and it needs to go down at least to a 6, especially on that folded side of the leaf shape. So we're going in for another wash to start building up that shadow side. And I'm making this a warmer green gray with some red and the blue and some sap green. You can also see the difference in the viscosity if you look at the green puddle of paint in my well above, and then you see this area of paint that I'm working on right now. When my brush goes through it, you can see how I can see the palette below it, and the paint kind of stays, how much more viscous the paint is. That is a clue that it's going to be much darker value than say that green puddle above it, because that's just a liquid. It's so suspended in water that that's going to dry a whole lot lighter than the other, that bronzy brown that I mixed. And I promise I haven't cut out any of these mixing steps. Sometimes I will mix a color and I just don't like it. I end up going away from it, but I definitely haven't cut any of that out, so you can see the trial and error process that's happening here. It's all a learning process still. Now on this leaf, I'm going to do a graded wash where I start with this warm brown color, and then I'm going to switch paint colors in the middle of this glaze and blend them together. And that, I love doing that. It just brings so much life to things. And so that's changing color within one wash, not waiting for it to dry and allowing those colors to blend. And then again, softening out all the edges. Obviously, that's a really big deal on this painting. This is one of the things that actually has taken me quite a long time to learn to do. And this succulent is just the perfect way to show how edges are important and how soft edges can be achieved in watercolor. Now on this back leaf or petal, I am being sure to stay away from the edge. I want to start building up the value, but leave that left side edge just the lightest color that I've put in, and to start building up the shadow there, but be sure to leave that other side light in value. And again, these leaves are really thick, and one way of showing that is having some reflected light on the side of the leaf so that it doesn't look like a flat object. If you paint the same color all the way to the edge, it'll look flat. And again, on this one, I'm going to paint kind of the half part that looks folded or like a little bit of a crease. So I'm accentuating that just a little bit. And then the shadow side as just the edge as it goes away right there. So now I'm just really going around and refining. I'm analyzing as I look at things what needs to get slightly darker. If there's anything that needs lifted, now is when I would do it. But I think at this point it seems really slow because I'm just making really slow changes to things. And this little section is interesting because again, this is a cast shadow that goes. It's not the actual shape of the object. It's the other objects above it that are making this shadow that I just put in. And so it goes down over the side of it there. It's also included in the cast shadow. Now, cast shadows like this one are something that is a little more of a slightly harsher edge, but still I'm going to blend it out. But the more that we put those shadows in deep in the crevice area of this plant, the more the lit areas will seem to glow. Once again, you have to have shadows or the light is just flat. Like it doesn't feel like there's light in a painting if there aren't any shadows. And shadows can be scary. I know that um, it's a little bit, we want to be tentative as we're putting in shadows, but it's really important. So for the next little bit, probably the next 20 minutes of film, I am continually just going around the painting, looking at the reference photo, gradually adding darker and darker shadows. I don't know how many times I paint this section of this leaf, and I will darken it and then lift it. It dries, I come back to it, add some more pigment. Anyway, I'm just gonna let it play, and then as we get closer to the darker shadows, I will add some more instructions. Okay, so we are finally getting closer to adding some more of what I would consider a dark value. So here I'm mixing what is a dark brown, but you can see I'm using almost all my pigments. I'm not using the raw sienna yet, and I'm not sure if I end up using it or not in this painting. So at this point, it only is the 4 colors. So it's kind of shocking when this first bit of real dark goes in. And sure enough, I'll go in and I'll blend it out. It's not that bad. But once I add a bit of that dark all around the painting, it is amazing how much it changes it. So you can see how even just these 4 little areas of a darker value, how much that changes the rest of the perspective on how dark the rest of it is. All of a sudden, the rest of it looks really light, even though we've got some areas up to like a 5 in value, but adding a 7 value really, really gives it depth and gives the other colors and the other values a sense of scale. So in this section on this leaf that's right underneath the leaf I've labeled 9, you'll see that I want to leave a really light edge to that leaf, but I want the part that's under the leaf number 9 to be darker. So even though that's not on your line drawing, hopefully you can see that that rim needs to be staying light. It's got reflected light bouncing off the other leaves and hitting it. And again, that will help it to not feel like a super flat leaf. It'll feel like it has depth. So now this deep neutral blue, blue-gray color is I would say going to be one of the darker areas of the painting. And this is such a scary part right here, but it just adds so much distinction between those 2 petals. And it's a cast shadow, so it has a little bit of a harder line. Of course, I'll soften it a little bit, but that crisp edge really helps the rounded edge to really show forward, and I just love that part. All right, now we are finally in the final stretch where we're going to start adding the red tips to the succulent. So before you go on, I would like you to take a picture of your painting at this stage and then convert it to black and white. And take a minute to analyze whether or not your values are correct, whether there's even values, that the areas of shadow are consistently the same value, that you don't have one area that's really standing out as way darker, or maybe just one or two areas of shadow, and that's all. Like, there needs to be enough around the shape that it makes sense. And then I'm going to clean out 3 of these wells and get started mixing a variety of reds. Now, this pyrrole red is an extremely strong pigment. It's fire engine red, and I hate wasting it, so I got too much on my brush the first time, so I'm diluting it down, but it's just so strong. So I'm going to mix some blue here with a little bit of red so that I have a little bit of a violet color. Add a little bit more blue to my blue-green mix here. Now that's still a pretty watery mix. You can just see the difference in the texture. All right, so we're going to get started, and of course, like everything else, we're going to start out slow. I'm not going to just go in with crazy bright reds of a dark value. I'm going to start with a lighter shade, and then once again, I'm using my reference photo. I'm looking at where the color is actually placed, and a lot of the color is on the very pointy tips of the succulent leaves, but then it is down the spine too, or the edge of the leaf, but it's not a perfect line. You'll see that it's a somewhat broken line. So I want to mimic that, maybe even exaggerate that a little bit so that it doesn't look like I've gone around and done a solid red line, like a coloring page look around every leaf. Each leaf needs to have, variety in the color of red. Yes, it's all red, but a bit of variety, and then a variety in the line width. We don't want it to look like it's, like I said, like a coloring page or something where it's gone through a printer and it's perfectly even all the way around each shape. That's just going to look really, really fake. So in nature, there's a lot of irregularity. So I try to make a point when I'm doing things like this to purposely tell myself not to make it even. One of the things that, it is human nature to want to make things, spaces between things even, or the line width perfectly even. So just being aware of that and consciously making the choice to not make things perfectly even, to dilute down with water and blend in the red so then it kind of just disappears is another great way to give variation. So another way we can show variation is to show variation in the saturation. So the bright red mix that I have, I just put on that upper side of that leaf, but then the other side that had been going down away from the light was less saturated. So that the more slightly purple. That's just another way to try to hint at the way the light is hitting. It would be a more saturated color in the direct light, but also just to show variation. That some areas that are on the rim are are a pretty pure red. Now it's diluted with water. It's definitely diluted, but it's not too diluted with other colors, or then purposely using the slightly desaturated, slightly purple red. And it's also not too late to do some touch-ups if you see a leaf that is just not quite dark enough or needs a little bit of a maybe warmer tone. That's what I was doing on this one, is adding a warmer tone on that upper edge before I add the red. And I'll probably let that dry before I add the red. So I'm going to go around and just add a tiny bit more of a warmer green, more yellow green, I should say, as opposed to a cooler green is leaning more towards blue. So this green is leaning more towards yellow. So now I'm going to mix a yellowy red and put it on the area of the leaf that is being most hit by the light, and then blend it into the pure, more pure red. So, and then I'm going into the purple side of the red for the slightly more shadowed side of this leaf. So that's kind of a pattern I'm going to be following with each leaf. And that's just something that, I'm just kind of trying to improve even on the photo. Sometimes there's things that that can add to a feeling of reality. Even if it's not in a photo, you can know that the human eye is going to perceive the warm and cool colors. Now this one, because it's underneath, it's going to be the purpley red and a little bit more saturated right at the corner, but in general it's more subdued. So anyway, there's just lots of fun things that you can do with color temperature to enhance the feeling of light. So the other thing that I want to point out is that where the succulent tips, they're almost like, I don't know, I'm kind of picturing it like a thorn, even though it's not that sharp, that the red starts fairly thin, and then as it comes to a point, it's a little bit deeper of a line. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm trying to give that red a moment to shine, and for it to almost feel at the end of each petal that it's becoming slightly more transparent. There's not as much color there already as we were building our values, but then when I put the red there, it's going to help it to feel more like a thorn or something like that. Anyway, the underside of this petal just needed a little bit of a bluish green to finish that out, and it's all right to add that now if you need. And then I did notice again that this petal is so dark in the photo, and the values are so much more intense that I still have more building up of value that I can do here. So it's, like I say, it's not too late to be making those adjustments. As you start adding in the red values, you might see that you're kind of missing a value in an area, and it's definitely not too late to do that. So continue to evaluate your painting Again, I'm just working off of what's in front of me and what my painting needs at this stage. So that's why it's really great. I love doing in-person classes or online Zoom style live classes, because I can then help you analyze what your painting needs at each stage. But I do think that's a learning process, that the learning to evaluate what each value needs to be, what needs to be darkened, maybe what even needs to be lightened as you're finishing up a painting, is really one of the most crucial parts of painting. All right, so I'm going to move up to this petal, and I want to preserve that feeling of light hitting the front of it, but then also try to create the feeling of a curve with this red line and its value. So it's a much darker value, the red is, than what I already have there. But so you can see that I'm blending it on the side obviously closest to my brush, but that's away from the light. I'm blending it on that side. The other side of that line I'm allowing to be a harsher line and preserving that white. I don't want that white to go away. So now I'm going on the other side of that little white strip and I'm darkening the leaf in front of it. So there's still this section of paper that's completely dry. So I can do that as long as I don't go over that little strip of white light there on the clean paper. It has a little bit of value on it, but you can see that I'm trying to keep that as light as I can to show the top of that leaf. All right, so for this leaf that's above the 5 and the 6 leaf, I'm going to also try to preserve some of the light. I don't want to cover it all with the red pigment. I want to um, still give the feeling that this leaf is thick and has that chunky texture. If I covered it all with the red value, it would lose that feeling. So I'm going to leave the underneath side. I'm going to leave that light. I'll probably darken it a little bit later, but you can see how I've left that underneath side of it pretty light. And again, that's going to give the feeling of reflected light onto the rounded bottom of that leaf. So next is our number 7 leaf. And one thing about this one is it feels to me like it's kind of turned away. And so one way that I'm going to show that is I'm not going to make this continuous line with the red or the reddish purple. I'm going to allow it um, to stop almost completely. So then it looks like the bottom edge of that leaf is turned under, like away from us, so we can't actually see where it's red, the reddish color. And right at the middle of that, it'll just see how I'm leaving part of it green, and not lining the whole thing. I think that that is giving the impression of it being turned under right there. At least that's my goal. Okay, so now we are on the real final touches of the final touches. So I'm going to be adding a little more darks, of course, as we go along. We see areas that need to be darkened, but then I'm going to be adding some touches of the pure Indian yellow, or, a, a very light wash of Indian yellow. And the reason that I'm doing this is I'm evaluating that overall, it feels very gray. It feels very cool, which I do want. But I just think as a painting, this succulent might not have a whole lot of warm colors in it in real life. But as a painting, it's good to have a balance of warm and cool colors. So as I was looking at it, I was thinking there's a lot of the cool grays, blue grays, and that just a few, sometimes I'm just going to do a half of the petal, again trying to show that that side of the petal is catching a bit more of the sunlight, and that is a way to just give the viewer a clue that it's a warmer shade. And then some of it I will go over with just a very light wash, just a little bit of the pure sap green. And again, it's just slightly more saturated, and um, it's going to be warmer than the blue greens that I've been doing. So in general, I'm warming up a few of these leaves. And this painting process took me a little over 2 hours with some breaks. This was actually not all done in one day. And this was without me teaching. I was just painting the example painting for my classes. And so you guys need to understand that this might take you 4 different sessions of sitting and watching and learning and observing and then painting yourself. Like, this is not a quick painting, as I'm going back and doing this voiceover and thinking about the steps required. It is not quick, and it's not easy to be learning and then applying what you're learning immediately and then trying to evaluate whether or not you've done what I was instructing you or not. So be sure to take breaks. Please don't try to do this all in one sitting. I certainly didn't, and that is okay. That's one of the things I love about painting and watercolor in particular, that it's fine until you can come back. It can wait for you, and then you can just pick up right where you left off. So I'm going to be adding some warmer yellows to the underneath sides of these rounded shapes. And I think this is probably my favorite part of the whole painting. All of a sudden, there was a glow in these rounded shapes that just made it feel so much more alive to me. And I was just so excited when that happened. And I hope that you can experience that too. Maybe when you're getting to this stage in your painting, you're tired and you're frustrated, or just tired. And so it's okay to put your painting away for a few days. Um, you know, put it with its face to the wall and let it just sit, and then get it out in a few days or even the next morning, and then evaluate it. And sometimes when you've given something a break and then you come back to it, you can see it with fresh eyes. You can see what it needs or what it doesn't need, what needs to be lifted. And then you might actually think, oh, it actually doesn't look as bad as I remember. The other thing that I really, really encourage you to do, if you've been to any of my classes, I always do this, is I have you look at your painting from 6 to 8 feet away. When you've been working on your painting, you're 18 to 12 inches away the whole time, and you're looking at it so closely that all you can see are the flaws and the things that you wish weren't looking like that. And I'm always surprised, and my students are always surprised when they look at something from 6 to 8 feet away, how much better it looks, but then also how they are able to identify what needs work much better from that distance, instead of being so close to it that all you can see is the little imperfections in the paper or where it's a little bit blotchy. Whereas when you get a little bit of distance, and also, again, a little bit of time, if you need to let it sit overnight, that's perfectly fine. In fact, I do encourage that. Like, just let it sit. Don't get frustrated. Try to come back to it the next day with an analytical mind. What does this need? What can I change? And be sure to email me if you have questions about what needs to change, because I really want to help in this stage of the process. Identifying what needs to change is the part that really I struggled with the most. Like, I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know what it needed for quite a few years. So I really want to be able to support you in that. So drop me an email and I'll be happy to help. We're getting there. We're getting so close to the final steps of this painting. And I just want to encourage you guys that you've done great. If you've made it this far, congratulations. This is a tough painting for a 5x7. It is challenging. And I would love to see your progress photos, your finished photos. Please send them to me. I would love to see them and give you feedback. And if you have any questions about how I accomplish this painting, what my process is, if there's anything that I've been unclear, please just drop me an email and let me know. Um, Again, this final phase of touching up, of just noticing if there's anything that's not consistent, it is the most challenging part of a painting, and it's where you'll see the most pauses. I'll start to do something and then I'll be thinking for a minute. Those long pauses are just real life. It's not, I don't always know exactly what I need to do. I have to stop and think about it for a second. And again, I'm still darkening these shadows. It kind of cracks me up how often I went back to these dark areas. But again, I was focusing on what does the value need to be, not just the color or the color temperature. The value is what's going to make this feel alive, and that was my goal. And I hope you could see that I did not accomplish correct values even the first 3 or 4 times I went over these leaves. I should go back and count and see how many times I actually painted those leaves right there. It was a lot. All right, so here's the final photo. It looks a little more saturated in a photo than the video. I will include a photo of the finished painting in your files. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you had fun painting with me, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.